When most people think about global power struggles, they imagine giant countries, superpowers like the United States and China battling it out on the world stage. But sometimes the most important players aren't the biggest. Sometimes the countries that shape the future are the ones quietly sitting between the giants, holding resources, geography, and influence that both sides desperately need. And one of those countries is Malaysia. Malaysia isn't loud. It doesn't dominate headlines like Taiwan or South Korea. It doesn't boast massive populations like Indonesia or the Philippines. But behind the scenes, Malaysia holds a strategic value that both Washington and Beijing fully understand. It has the natural resources they need, it plays a major role in the global tech industry, and geographically, it sits in one of the most important locations on Earth. In a world where the US and China are increasingly competing for influence, Malaysia has somehow become the country they both can't afford to lose. So let's break down exactly why the United States and China both need Malaysia, more than most people realize. Number 1. Access to natural resources and energy trade. Malaysia is one of those countries where nature blessed it with a little bit of everything: oil, natural gas, minerals, fertile land, and one very strategic advantage: rare earth elements, the critical minerals that modern technology depends on. And in today's world, resources shape power. Let's start with energy. Malaysia is the second largest oil producer in Southeast Asia, pumping around 600,000 barrels of oil per day. It is also one of the region's biggest exporters of LNG, and countries like Japan, South Korea, China, and even parts of Europe rely on Malaysian LNG to keep their industries running. For China, Malaysia is a reliable energy partner close to home. Energy security is one of China's biggest concerns, and Malaysia helps diversify its supply so it isn't fully dependent on the Middle East.
For the U.S., the situation is a bit different. America doesn't need Malaysian oil, but it does need Malaysia to keep the regional energy routes open. The U.S. Navy depends on safe shipping lanes in Southeast Asia to maintain global trade stability. Even if the U.S. is energy independent, the rest of the world isn't, and the global economy that America leads depends heavily on the smooth flow of oil and gas through Malaysia's neighborhood. So Malaysia's stability matters to Washington. But the real star of the show is something far less glamorous but far more powerful: rare earth elements. Rare earths are inside everything: iPhones, electric cars, wind turbines, satellites, F-35 fighter jets, you name it. China currently dominates the rare earth industry, controlling 60–70% of global production and around 85% of processing. This gives China enormous leverage over the world's tech and defense industries. And because the U.S. sees China as a strategic competitor, relying on China for critical minerals is extremely risky. This is where Malaysia becomes essential. Malaysia hosts Lynas, the world's largest rare earth processing operation outside of China. Lynas is basically America's and the West's lifeline. Without it, China would have almost total control over the global rare earth supply chain. That's why Washington has been funding and supporting Lynas's expansion. So, whether it's oil, natural gas, or rare earths, Malaysia is much more than a small Southeast Asian nation. It's a resource gateway that both superpowers need to secure their economic and technological futures.
Number 2. Malaysia as a key player in the tech and semiconductor supply chain. This is the part most people never see coming. Malaysia is a global tech powerhouse. Not in the loud, flashy Silicon Valley way, but in the quiet, essential way that keeps the world's electronics running. Malaysia handles around 13% of the world's semiconductor packaging and testing. That may not sound exciting, but it's one of the most crucial steps in the chip-making process. Imagine a microchip as a brain. You can design it in the US, manufacture the silicon wafer in Taiwan, but you still need someone to assemble, test, and package it so it actually works. And that someone is often Malaysia. Without these steps, you simply don't have a functioning chip. Some of the world's biggest tech companies have been in Malaysia for decades. Intel has been operating in Penang since 1972 and is now investing over $7 billion to expand its factories. Companies like AMD, Infineon, Texas Instruments, and Bosch all have major manufacturing hubs here. And Penang has earned the nickname Silicon Valley of the East for a good reason. It is one of the world's most important electronics ecosystems. China also depends on Malaysia. As tensions between the U.S. and China rise, Chinese firms need stable partners in Southeast Asia to keep their supply chains running. Malaysia is neutral, skilled, and reliable, making it the perfect middle ground manufacturing base. For the U.S., Malaysia is a China alternative. American companies have been shifting parts of their supply chain out of China, and Malaysia is one of the biggest winners. It offers strong infrastructure, a skilled workforce, political stability, and a long history of working with Western multinationals. So even though Malaysia doesn't design the most advanced chips, it plays one of the most important roles in the global electronics system, the role of finishing, testing, and ensuring reliability. In the semiconductor world, that makes Malaysia indispensable for both the U.S. and China.
And number 3, Malaysia controls the middle ground of Southeast Asia. Now let's dive into the geopolitical story, because this is where Malaysia becomes incredibly strategic. In Southeast Asia, countries usually lean clearly toward one side. The Philippines leans toward the U.S., Cambodia leans toward China. Vietnam stands somewhere in between, but is clearly wary of Beijing. Malaysia, however, has mastered the art of strategic balance. It maintains deep economic ties with China. China is Malaysia's largest trading partner for 15 consecutive years. But at the same time, the U.S. remains one of Malaysia's largest investors, especially in high-tech industries. Malaysia conducts military exercises with the U.S., but refuses to take an anti-China position. It welcomes Chinese investments, but also supports freedom of navigation, which aligns with U.S. strategic interests. This balanced position makes Malaysia incredibly valuable. Both sides want Malaysia on their side, or at the very least not working against them. And in a divided world, being neutral is a form of power. Geography makes Malaysia even more important. Malaysia sits right next to the Strait of Malacca, one of the world's most important shipping lanes. Around 80% of China's imported oil and almost 30% of global trade pass through this narrow stretch of water. If the Strait of Malacca were ever blocked, China would face an immediate energy crisis. That's why Chinese scholars often talk about the Malacca dilemma, their dependence on this single choke point. The U.S. Navy, which protects global maritime trade, also depends on stable access to the Malay Peninsula. Without cooperation from Malaysia, its ability to operate freely in Southeast Asia would be much more complicated. So Malaysia isn't just a country, it's a position, a geographic advantage, a balancing force. And in the U.S.-China rivalry, the country that controls the middle ground often controls the outcome.
So when you put everything together, natural resources, rare earths, semiconductor manufacturing, political neutrality, and strategic geography, it becomes clear why Malaysia is suddenly such a hot asset in the eyes of both superpowers. The U.S. needs Malaysia to secure the global supply chain, maintain access to Southeast Asian waters, and reduce dependence on China. China needs Malaysia for energy, trade stability, shipping security, and diplomatic support within ASEAN. Malaysia is not a bystander in the U.S.-China rivalry. It's a crucial player, one that both sides respect, need, and hope to win over. And the irony is that Malaysia didn't chase this position. It's simply the result of geography, history, resources, and smart diplomacy. In the end, the world's biggest powers may be competing for global influence, but the future of that competition may depend on countries like Malaysia, quiet, strategic, and more important than anyone realizes.
So, what do you think? Is Malaysia truly a unique country, one that both China and the United States are eager to influence? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. And most importantly, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more insightful content.